Hi there, it's Wendy Hernandez, and welcome to another edition of Command the Courtroom. Today, I have a really special guest to introduce you to. Her name is Sherry Gaba, and Sherry is a licensed psychotherapist, life coach, and she helps people cope with lifelong addictions, including substance abuse, shopping, gambling, food, sex and love, codependency, trauma, depression, anxiety, single parenting, and divorce. Sherry appeared on VH1's groundbreaking docu-reality TV series Celebrity Rehab seasons 3, 4, and 5. She also facilitated life coaching on the show's spin-off series Sober House and Celebrity Rehab's Sex Addiction. And I'm thrilled to have Sherry with us here today. Sherry, thanks for being here and joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for the work you're doing. And I'm glad I can enlighten your audience on what codependency is about.
Awesome. Thank you, Sherry, for the work you're doing. So let's talk about codependency. Can you explain what codependency is?
So it's often been referred to as a relationship addiction or love addiction, and it really is about alleviating the pain and emptiness one feels. Maybe they've been abandoned, they can't stand being alone, they just need to be in relationship, and their behavior becomes very controlling, and they do a lot of fixing and manipulating. Their thinking becomes really obsessive, compulsive, and there's really adverse consequences for codependency. It might be somebody who's calling their partner all the time, or their ex, or somebody that's constantly trying to accommodate the person that they're in a relationship with, which makes them really vulnerable to, narcissist and narcissistic abuse, or being with an addict. Originally, it was really about your relationship with the addict or alcoholic, enabling them, controlling them, trying to fix and change them. But it's kind of broadened the definition, and it's really a loss of self. And so everything becomes very other focused. It's the symptoms are on a continuum. They can range from mild to severe. One of the big symptoms is denial, like being in love with the illusion of who you think someone is rather than who they really are. There's sort of a craving and reward, almost like a drug addict goes through. And it's sort of an inability to control or abstain this behavior, this control of somebody else. So you spend a lot of time thinking about being with that person, trying to control them, just as a drug addict tries to control their drug use. The codependent is often trying to control the other person, whoever that their partner is. Could also be their children. It could be anybody in their life that they feel this need where they feel out of control and they're trying to control their activities. So they really do suffer a lot. They have a lot of interpersonal relationship problems because of this behavior. And it can almost be similar to love addiction, relationship addiction, but really most love addicts are codependents. A codependent doesn't necessarily have to be a love addict. You can also be a codependent in a work environment. And your neighbors, always trying to please, always needing validation, always needing lots of attention. Just this kind of chronic emptiness inside, always trying to fill it up with the outside.
Okay. All right. That is definitely a broader definition than the one I've heard in the past. So I'm really glad to hear, the updated version, the evolved version.
And, some people don't even, really, there's a doctor out there that talks about prodependence. And so he doesn't like the shame that's involved when we talk about codependency. And I really like what he's saying, because, what he's saying is, it's the, how can you love an addict? How can you love this person? I mean, we've picked broke people. Why? Because we've been broken. So I don't like when we put shame to the word codependency, because loving someone, I was married to an alcoholic. He was a great guy, except he had a really bad disease. And I felt really shameful at times for that, trying to help him. And so it's only a problem when it gets out of control, when you're trying to really help somebody to the extent where your life becomes really unmanageable. But there's nothing wrong with loving who we love. We just have to take care of ourselves if that person isn't willing to get help.
Got it. Okay, excellent. And I'm sure, as we go in the interview, you're going to talk to people about how they can help themselves. But, I have another question. Can you tell us about how trauma affects, or what it has to do with codependency, and how this affects being radically authentic?
So when you don't receive what you need as a child, your emotional growth is stunted. So if you were neglected or abused, or had parents that were emotionally, physically unavailable, or maybe you became a little adult or a little parentified child, it really sets you up for difficult adult relationships, because victims of trauma have sort of a false reality of themselves. They don't know who their real self is because they were never acknowledged or validated or seen or heard, so they feel invisible. So they don't trust themselves, they second guess themselves, they don't trust their emotions because they can't even access what their true feelings are. So the reason being is, if you were invisible as a child due to neglect or abuse or unavailable parenting, there was no one to really hear you, see you, know what you're about. So you don't even know what you're about, because all of that we learned by mirroring our parents and getting that acknowledgement. So you learn at an early age that your feelings don't really count because you weren't heard or validated. So you really become very other focused. And that's why you're often attracted to narcissists, toxic relationships, addicts, alcoholics. You learn to focus on everything around you rather than your own needs, which really at the foundation is discovering who you really are by knowing what your needs are, what your preferences are. So if you don't have an intimate relationship with yourself, it's really difficult to have an intimate relationship with another person. So all your relationships become really other focused, and that really is at the core of codependency. And, early trauma it really does carry a lot of shame with it. Shame is rooted in this childhood programming that often comes from this dysfunctional family. And, it can be coupled with low self-esteem, not feeling good enough, not belonging, anger, resentment, depression, anxiety. But mostly it results in putting everything and everyone else's needs before your own. That's why you're often attracted to a narcissist, because really what they want is for you to fulfill their needs, and there you are ready to fulfill them. So you really have difficulty in relationships. You're very vulnerable to predators, and you become really invisible like you did as a child. And then you end up doing all the giving and are the perfect target for someone to take advantage of you.
Oh, wow. Okay. I mean, that definitely kind of is a light shining on a lot of the questions that I've had, and I know that my viewers have. I think that a lot of the people who follow Command the Courtroom are involved with narcissists. At least I hear that a lot. And I've always wondered what it is that makes a person attracted to a narcissistic person and then continue to do that, repeat it in relationships over and over again. So
Yeah, no,
yeah.
that's a common dance, the codependent and the narcissist. Narcissists have sort of this need for supply, and the codependent will supply it because the codependent's worth is you needing me. So, it's almost like a codependent has to ask themselves, who am I if you don't need me? And they usually pick partners that replicate what they grew up with. So often they had narcissistic parents or addict parents or parents that weren't available. So, it's really all about reconditioning our subconscious, learning to, well, we'll get into how you break free, but this is often why codependents and narcissists find each other.
Okay. All right. That's a great explanation. So if somebody's listening to this and they're thinking, I'm wondering if I'm codependent because I'm in this relationship with the narcissist, or I have a long history of relationships with narcissists, or, they're just thinking maybe I am. Can you tell us how a person can identify whether or not they might be codependent?
Sure. Well, looking at your childhood, looking at your family of origin, did you come from a dysfunctional family? Were your emotional needs not met? Did you receive very little nurturing? I often tell my story about being a preemie baby in an incubator for 2.5 months, and I didn't get that early bonding with my mother. So there was this like empty hole inside of me, and I was always looking outside myself. So it's understanding, what was your relationship with your parent or caregiver? If we were never able to change our parents into the warm, loving caretakers we long for, then we respond deeply to the familiar type of emotionally unavailable person, which is often a narcissist, whom we think we can change through our love, which of course, that is not true. You can't change anybody. And you're really terrified of abandonment. That was my biggest issue. We'll do anything to hold on to a relationship in order not to experience painful abandonment feelings. So it's really important that's why I was talking about really connecting with yourself first. Otherwise, you have this empty hole and nobody can fill it but you. There's almost nothing too much trouble for a codependent. They'll do anything for that other person. Nothing is too much time or too expensive to help that other person. They're just so accustomed to lack of love in personal relationships that they're sort of waiting and hoping and just trying harder and harder to please. And with the narcissist, the narcissists are often, undermining their confidence, their self-esteem, and there's sort of this crazy making going on that they invalidate their thoughts, their emotions. So then the codependent starts to second guess themselves. So they're, and then their self-esteem just gets lower and lower, and then they're sort of hooked into this relationship. And the narcissist often will drop in little goodies, suddenly give a little hope, suddenly become charming again, and then they take it away. So there's this loop that goes on and on. There's just this desperate need to control people in our relationships, having had such little security growing up. So we mask our efforts to control people and situation as being helpful, but really we're trying to avoid that emptiness, that abandonment, that feeling of nothingness.
So is codependence like an all or nothing thing, or is it everybody has some level of codependence, or that they are codependent on some level?
It's mostly an issue when your life is just out of control. You keep picking the same, empty relationships. Your pickers off, as they say. I think there is a continuum. And again, I really want to emphasize there's nothing to be ashamed of if you've fallen into this trap of meeting the same type of person over and over again and loving them. Broken people pick broken people. And until we fix ourselves, we may keep attracting that, but not to feel like there's something, terribly wrong with you. It's just about doing the healing, doing the trauma work. One of the issues I think is that a lot of people don't get the help they need in terms of trauma therapy, which is something I do called somatic experiencing. They end up doing talk therapy, which really doesn't hit the trauma points. So it's a continuum, but there's nothing wrong with being a kind person, a loving person, a giving person. But in a healthy relationship, it's reciprocal. It's a back and forth, give and take. You're not doing all the giving.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for that. So, I think this is an interesting idea, this thought of codependency, especially now that we're in the middle of a pandemic. People are isolated from one another. They're having to stay home. And, I think it may be causing anxiety or stress for people, especially who are codependent. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, it's a really stressful time. It even challenged my relationship, and there was some issues with the pandemic, and so I had to really kind of revisit all my own codependency recovery. But the pandemic is a really slippery slope, because not only is there the stress of the pandemic and getting the virus, or someone you love getting the virus, but also the financial fallout. So if you're now living with partners 24 hours a day and your boundaries aren't clear, partners can easily take advantage of each other. So if one partner's not working or the other partner's carrying them financially, they may become very controlling and resentful. So those little codependency traits can show up. It's so important to stay on your own path, not get into the business of others, giving each other enough space and support. When you're under stress, many of the codependency behaviors, such as anger and neediness and resentment and becoming controlling, can really rear its ugly head. So just be really mindful of staying connected to your own recovery. It's so important.
So on the idea of recovery, and I know we're going to get into this in a minute, but like any kind of recovery from alcoholism or any sort of addiction, is a codependency recovery something that's a lifelong process, or?
It's a muscle you exercise forever. You're constantly revisiting it. I mean, that is absolutely correct. But the good news is that the symptoms are reversible when a codependent gets the help they need. They don't have to stay stuck. They don't have to stay stuck in a crisis. But sometimes it just takes enough pain to motivate them to get the help they need. So recovery is really all about right here, listening to this podcast, reading books. My book on Amazon called Love Smack talks about codependency and love addiction. And it begins with education, really getting out of the denial, not living in that illusion of who you want someone to be, but really understanding who you're with. So reading about it is a great start. Therapy, like I said earlier, getting some kind of trauma therapy, maybe entering some 12-step programs such as Al-Anon or Codependence Anonymous or Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. I mean, in recovery, this is the first step to gaining hope, and the focus starts to shift from other people to yourself. And then there's middle and late stages of recovery that often parallel recovery, like addictions. In the middle stages, you begin to build your own identity, self-esteem. You begin to assert your feelings, your wants, your needs. You know what your preferences are. You learn about self-responsibility and boundaries and self-care. Start understanding your early trauma. And then in the later stages, happiness and self-esteem doesn't have to depend just on others. You know, you gain the capacity for your own autonomy, your own intimacy. You begin to experience your own power, self-love. And then you start to feel expansive and creative with the ability to start, generating and pursuing your own goals. So it doesn't automatically disappear when you leave a codependent relationship. Like I said, like you said, it's an ongoing maintenance program. There is no perfect abstinence. Codependent behavior can easily return. I mean, I was married to an alcoholic. I took him back. I definitely slipped into a codependent amnesia. And again, it's so important. And this is why I wrote the book Love Smacked, is for people just not to feel ashamed of the choices they've made. As long as they're, starting to learn from these experiences and moving forward. And even when you relapse, it's not about beating yourself up. It's just about starting over again.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about Love Smacked? I know it just came out within the last couple months, isn't that right?
Yeah, it did come out, and it's a really great book. It really does dive into love addiction and codependency. It has all kinds of exercises. It's really easy to read. It's not like this real academic book. It's for people to really understand and work on themselves in sort of a workbook type setting, so to speak. And then, of course, I have my groundbreaking program, Wake Up Recovery, which for right now, I'm offering it for $1. And it's a whole membership community. We do a Facebook page. We do 2 live coaching sessions a month. It's kind of unbelievable that it's $27 a month. To join, it's $1, and then it goes to $27. And you're literally getting 2 group coaching sessions with me a month. You're getting tons of interviews, videos. You're getting the course, Wake Up Recovery, which is really amazing. I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, you definitely want to check it out. So I'm sure you'll have the link there. And what's nice is just to be with like-minded people. I mean, different times in my life, I always found group settings were really helpful. When I was a single mom, I joined a single parent group. So if you're struggling, with codependency, or you've loved a narcissist, or you're dealing with a narcissistically abusive relationship, you definitely want to check out Wake Up Recovery. And then I think I'm giving a free ebook away, The Truth About Codependency. So check that out. It's a free resource. Just Google my name, Sherry Gaba. I blog, I have videos. I'm pretty much all over the internet.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, I also noticed that you have a quiz maybe that people can take. What's the quiz about?
Yeah, the quiz goes with the ebook. So basically,
what
you have will be a quiz, and then when you answer the quiz, it'll give you answers as to where you rate in terms of codependency, and then you'll get the free ebook.
Okay, so for people out there who have had nothing but unhealthy, toxic, just terrible relationships, would you say that there's hope for them, even if they're codependent?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's hope. It's you're more than your codependency. You're a whole person. You're resourceful. You're creative. You deserve peace and serenity. And it just depends on where you are right now in your relationship. Is this something that is fixable? Is it not fixable? Have you tried over and over again, and you need to make some changes? You can make changes. Don't ever feel you're stuck. You're never stuck. And healthy relationships await you if you do the work. You got to be willing to do the work and do the healing.
Exactly. Awesome. What a wonderful message, Sherry. And so your website is?
Well, there's sherrygaba.com. And then I think you're going to have in the show notes the Wake Up Recovery link, right, for the $1 membership.
Yes.
And then we'll also have in your show notes the quiz and the free ebook. So I don't want people to get confused, but if you want to list them all there, that'd be great. And then the book Love Smacked is on Amazon.
Awesome, you guys. So if this show is speaking to you, please check Sherry out. I think that she has a ton of valuable information to share with you to help you get where you want to be with yourself first and then with your relationship. So thank you so much, Sherry.
You're welcome, Wendy. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So you guys, until next time, I want you to remember to keep doing the work. I always tell you to roll up your shirt sleeves. And if you're codependent, you heard what Sherry just told you, you got to do the work. And until next week, get out there and command the courtroom. See you next time. Bye.